There's a very specific kind of silence that hits you when you step into your house after midnight. It's not peaceful like a lullaby or anything. It's more like walking into a paused movie, like the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting for you to notice what's off. That's how it felt when I got home last Thursday night. I wasn't supposed to be back until Friday, but I'd had enough of corporate hotel eggs and overly chipper receptionists calling me Mr. Langford with a fake smile and a worse attitude. So I ditched the final client dinner, grabbed a Red Bull, and drove 4 hours straight with just an AM radio station playing trucker call-ins and a packet of sour gummy worms that fused together like asphalt in my center console. The house looked exactly as I left it, porch light on a timer. Blue recycling bin still on its side. The wind must have knocked it over again. And the giant ceramic frog Mara bought from that roadside flea market still glaring at me from the flower bed like it knew something I didn't. I parked in the driveway, didn't bother bringing in the suitcase, just left it in the kitchen like a guest who wasn't planning to stay long. The fridge made its usual dying walrus sound, and I grabbed a glass of water, half-melted ice cubes. She always forgets to refill the tray. I walked down the hallway barefoot. Carpet still smelled faintly of lavender Febreze and whatever pet shampoo she'd been testing on the dog next door. Our bedroom door was cracked open, no lights on. And here's where my brain tried to save me. It really did. Because for a second, just a second, I thought maybe the shadows were playing tricks. Maybe the lump under the covers was just pillows. Maybe the soft breathing I heard wasn't that. But then her hand moved. Not in a dream twitch sort of way. In that lazy, post-cozy, resting on someone's chest kind of way. And I knew. I didn't flip the light. I didn't say her name. I didn't even step into the room. I just stood there long enough to feel the weight of the air shift, like the house itself was asking, "You sure you want to see more?" I turned around and went to the guest room. The sheets were stiff. The ceiling fan was louder than I remembered. I stared at the blades for a while, then closed my eyes. I didn't cry. That's the thing people assume, that you cry or punch a wall or scream. But the truth is, sometimes your brain just pulls the emergency brake. Like it says, "Yeah, we're not doing emotions tonight, buddy. Let's just power down." So I slept. I slept like a guy who hadn't just found his wife sleeping next to someone else. Because in that moment, denial wasn't a river. It was a warm blanket and a busted ceiling fan that creaked like a rocking chair. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon and freshly brewed coffee. The same stupid smell that used to make Saturday mornings feel like a Norman Rockwell painting. I walked into the kitchen and there she was, Mara. Hair in a messy bun, wearing the Death Before Decaf t-shirt I bought her 2 anniversaries ago from a novelty coffee shop in Austin. "Hey, baby," she chirped like nothing happened. "When did you get in?" "About 2, I said, grabbing a mug. She blinked. "This morning?" I nodded, poured coffee, took a bite of the bacon she'd already laid out. Crispy, just the way I liked it. She was doing that thing with her eyes. The one where she tries to read your mood like she's browsing a menu. Friendly, confused, calculating. "Why'd you sleep in the guest room?" she asked, voice all light and nonchalant. "Didn't want to wake you," I replied, which wasn't a lie. Not technically. She hesitated for a second too long, then laughed, a little too loudly. "Well, it's good to have you back. I missed you." I chewed my bacon slowly. It was extra salty that morning. We didn't talk much after that. I said I had errands in the city. She kissed my cheek. I could still smell last night's cologne on her skin. Something citrusy and smug. On the way out, I stopped at Latham & Co., the law office 2 blocks from my work. I'd booked an initial consult 3 weeks earlier, a just-in-case sort of thing, back when her yoga instructor friends started popping up more often in conversation. Colin said this. Colin brought that. Colin thinks goat. Cheese is better for digestion. You know, red flag stuff disguised as goat cheese wisdom. I met with the attorney. Nice guy. Quiet voice. Firm handshake, looked like the type who keeps receipts from 2004. Just in case. We went over a few options: joint assets, real estate holdings, the retirement plan we hadn't touched. Nothing final, just groundwork, just information. When I got home, Mara was in the living room pretending to look busy. The vacuum was out, but not plugged in. She offered me dinner. I declined. Instead, I mowed the lawn. Then I replaced the porch light bulb that had been flickering for 6 months. Then I washed my truck, twice. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even thinking about her. I just didn't want to sit still. Stillness would make me feel things, and I wasn't in the mood for that yet. That night, she came to the guest room, knocked once, then peeked in. "Derek?" she said softly. I ordered a new bed from that Sleepin' True catalog. You know, the one with the orthopedic support and the smart cooling gel foam? I smiled. "Sounds fancy." "It's for us," she added. "Like a fresh start." I nodded. "Cool." And that was it. She stood there for a moment longer, like she wanted to say something else. But eventually she left. I pulled the guest blanket over my chest and stared at the ceiling fan again. The creak was softer this time. Maybe it was getting used to me. Tuesday mornings usually meant spreadsheets, lukewarm office coffee, and listening to Gary from Regional try to explain why freight costs are just a little higher than projected. But this Tuesday, I sat at our kitchen island eating toast while my wife stood 3 feet away trying not to come undone. "I keep thinking about last night," Mara said, stirring her coffee with the kind of intensity that suggested she wished. "The spoon was a jackhammer. Why'd you sleep in the guest room again?" I looked up from my toast. "It was late. You were asleep." She forced a smile. "But you came home at, what, 2? "More like 1:40. She blinked. That detail seemed to throw her off. More than anything. Like maybe she hadn't budgeted for that exact timestamp. Like maybe Colin's shoes were still by the bed at 1:30. She set the mug down, too fast. Little splash on the counter. "Did you, see something?" I wiped my mouth. "Nah." That one word felt like a trap door opening. She stared at me like she was trying to translate it from some dead language. I stood, rinsed the plate, and added, "I'm heading into town. Got a few things to knock out." She nodded. "Right, sure. Let me know if you want me to make anything for dinner." I didn't respond. I just grabbed my keys and left. The sun was blinding that day, the kind that reflects off your windshield and makes you question every life decision, including the off-brand sunglasses you keep meaning to replace. I drove with the windows down, classic rock humming low through the speakers, letting the miles do the talking. First stop, my office. Signed a few papers, pretended to listen during a Zoom check-in with a client who only speaks in acronyms. Then, I stopped by Latham & Co. again. This time I asked for numbers, not possibilities, plans, contingencies, division of property. Account separation. No drama. Just the facts. "Do you want to keep the house?" my attorney asked. I shrugged. "She can have it. I'll keep the truck." He raised an eyebrow. "That truck's worth maybe $9 grand? "Yeah, but it's mine," he smiled. "You're a simple man, Mr. Langford." More than people think. I got home before sunset. Mara was in the backyard doing yoga, or pretending to. She held a pose for all of 4 seconds before checking her phone. Probably checking for his name, or maybe checking if he hadn't texted, which would be worse. I didn't interrupt, just walked inside, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and stepped into the garage. That place had always been mine, cluttered, greasy, smelling faintly of WD-40, and worn leather gloves. I swept the floor, reorganized the shelves, and fixed the lamp in the hallway she kept nagging about. I wasn't angry. Just methodical. Like if I kept my hands moving, my head wouldn't drift toward questions I didn't want to ask yet. Not because I couldn't handle the answers, but because I already knew them. That night, I grilled chicken, just for me. She came out holding 2 plates. "I made couscous," she said, "with roasted vegetables. Your favorite." I pointed to the grill. "Already ate," she bit her lip. "Derek, we should talk." "Not tonight." "Why not?" "Because you're not ready to be honest, and I'm not ready to pretend I don't already know." She looked like she might cry. Then she didn't. She just nodded and walked back inside. I slept in the guest room again. She didn't knock this time. The next day passed in silence. I spent the afternoon scrubbing the inside of the car with the kind of focus usually reserved for brain surgery. I cleaned under the seats, organized the glove box, and found 3 parking receipts from places I'd never been. One of them dated the weekend I was in Phoenix. Interesting. But I wasn't collecting evidence. This wasn't a trial. That evening, Mara came into the garage with a catalog in hand. One of those glossy, overpriced magazines that look like they're selling furniture but are actually selling hope. "I was thinking we could get a new bed," she said, "from Sleep and True. They have this model with orthopedic lumbar tech and an adaptive cooling core." I raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like something an astronaut would sleep on." She laughed, too hard, too desperate. "Well, I thought it could be like a reset for us. A bed? A symbol." I wiped my hands with a rag. "Sure, whatever you think helps." She looked relieved, like I'd just given her permission to buy forgiveness. I didn't say anything else. Just turned back to the toolbox and kept working. She stood there for another minute, like she wanted to hug me or scream or confess. But she didn't do any of that. She just walked away. That night, I lay on the guest mattress listening to the gentle tick of the hallway clock. One of the old ones, analog, battery-operated with a faint whir and a personality of its own. I'd hung it back when we painted the hallway together, laughing at how I couldn't tape a straight line and she couldn't resist picking navy blue for every room. I thought about that version of her, of us, the before version. Back, when the biggest threat to our marriage was whether to get a dog or a second car. And now we were here. 2 people, in the same house, orbiting each other like satellites with dead radios. And me, I was fine. Really. Because I knew something she didn't. I'd already picked the day, the moment. I just hadn't told her yet. Next Wednesday, no drama, no fight, no screaming, just a clean break. I fell asleep with a smirk on my face and the faint scent of Sleep and True catalog paper still lingering in the air. Saturday came and went without incident. I spent most of it pretending to be busy, polished my boots, realigned the kitchen cabinet doors that had always been slightly off. The kind of thing you stop noticing after a few months of marriage, or maybe choose to. I didn't ask where Mara was, and she didn't ask what I was doing. We coexisted, like 2 co-workers in a failing startup. That night, she made lentil soup and tried to start a conversation about that documentary on Scandinavian design. I nodded a lot. Said things like interesting and while scrolling through a local hardware store's online catalog like it was pornography. But Sunday? Sunday was different. I woke up to the smell of cinnamon and warm dough. There was music playing, soft jazz, the kind you'd hear in a hotel lobby with just enough saxophone to feel like something was about to happen. I walked into the kitchen and there she was, flipping French toast like a woman hosting a cooking segment on daytime TV. She even had fresh squeezed orange juice on the counter. Not store-bought. Actual squeezed oranges. She hates pulp. "Morning," she said, beaming. "Hungry?" I looked at the table. It was set with our wedding china, the stuff we'd used twice in 10 years. I noticed a white linen napkin folded like some origami bird next to my fork. "What's the occasion?" I asked. She smiled. "Just thought it'd be nice to, reconnect." Sure, I said. Nothing says fresh start like tableware we forgot we owned. She laughed a little too loud again. That had become her new tell, like a poker player overplaying a bluff. I sat down, took a bite. The French toast was perfect, thick, eggy, dusted with powdered sugar. Too bad betrayal doesn't cancel out flavor. We were halfway through breakfast when the doorbell rang. Mara jumped a little. "Oh, I think that's the bed delivery." She wiped her hands and rushed to the door. A pair of guys in branded polos wheeled in giant boxes labeled Sleep and True, model Somnus Elite, because of course our new beginning had a name that sounded like a Roman gladiator. I watched silently as she signed the delivery slip, smiling like a woman in a furniture commercial. When the doorbell rang a second time, I thought maybe they forgot a box. Nope, it was Colin. He stood on our porch wearing a loose beige hoodie, joggers, and that vaguely unwashed look of a man who gets up at 6 a.m. to meditate near streams. In one hand, he held a paper bag from some gluten-free bakery. In the other, a reusable coffee thermos covered in stickers that said things like "breathe" and "body is a temple." Mara froze. "Oh," she said. "I didn't know you were coming." He smiled, sheepish. "Thought I'd swing. By, say hi. I brought your favorite, morning buns, the cardamom ones from Urban Root." I stepped out from behind the kitchen doorway and into the hall. "Urban Root?" I asked. "Sounds fancy." He blinked like I'd appeared, out of thin air. "Hey, Derek. I didn't know you were living here," I finished for him. "Yeah. Wild, right? Turns out marriage is still a thing in some states." Mara said nothing, just looked between us like a referee at a slow-motion fight. Colin shifted, his weight clutching the bag like it was a peace offering from an invading army. "We should probably talk." "Oh, I think we've done all the talking we need to," I said, stepping closer. "Well, technically, you two did most of it. I just happened to overhear. Thin walls, old insulation. You'd be surprised how well whispering travels at 2 in the morning. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Look, I didn't mean to—" "Sure you didn't. And I didn't mean to come home early either. Life's full of accidents." Mara cleared her throat. "Colin, maybe now's not the best time." I turned to her. "Actually, this is perfect. Sunday brunch with the yoga guy. It's practically a lifestyle blog." Colin stepped back. "I didn't come here to cause problems." "That's good," I said, reaching for the door, "because I already have a solution." He hesitated. Then, to his credit, nodded, handed Mara the bag, and walked away. I closed the door behind him and turned to face her. Her eyes were wide. She looked like a kid who just realized the substitute teacher knows her real name. "You planned this," she whispered. "Nope," I said. "Just read the room." She opened the bag, took out one of the buns, then set it on the counter without tasting it. "I don't even like cardamom," she muttered. "I know," I replied. "That was always Colin's thing, wasn't it?" She looked at me like I'd just hit her with something heavier than words. I walked past her, poured myself another cup of coffee, our old drip machine, not the sleek, overpriced espresso, gadget she got last Christmas, for the aesthetic. Then I headed back out to the garage. She didn't follow, didn't ask if we were okay, didn't apologize. She just stood there in that perfect little kitchen next to the table she'd set, for a future that didn't exist anymore. And me? I felt lighter than I had in months, because now there were no more masks, just breakfast, betrayal, and a fresh memory foam mattress that neither of us would sleep well on again. Monday morning arrived like it always does, with the faint grind of the garbage truck out front and the scent of drip coffee filling the kitchen before the sun even had a chance to warm the windows. The only thing different was me. I sat at the table, reading a 2-day-old newspaper I'd pulled from the bottom of the recycling bin. Not because I cared about the headlines, I just liked the feel of it. The quiet crinkle, the smell of ink. Something about it felt honest. Unlike most things in that house. Mara walked in, dressed in her WFH casual, soft sweater, leggings, and the faint outline of guilt under her eyes. She moved like someone hoping not to step on broken glass, even though the floor was spotless. "Hey," she said softly. "Morning," I replied without looking up. She poured herself coffee, paused, then sat across from me. For a few minutes, we just existed in parallel. Two people who used to be one team, now just trying not to step into each other's shadows. "I was thinking," she said eventually. "Maybe we could talk tonight?" I nodded. "Sure, let's do that." Her eyes searched mine for meaning. Hope, maybe. She didn't find any. I left for work earlier than usual. Didn't really need to. Mondays are slow, and no one in logistics expects fireworks at 8:15 a.m. But I wanted time. Space. I stopped by the deli for a breakfast sandwich I didn't need, then sat in the truck outside the office watching. People walked to their desks with the weight of small lives on their backs. Laptops, paper bags, forgotten dreams. At lunch, I got a call from Latham & Co. "Everything's ready," the assistant said. "Would you like us to send someone to deliver the packet?" I gave them the address, told them to aim for around 6 p.m., just when the light starts to get gold in our kitchen, and she's usually chopping vegetables she won't finish cooking. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, the porch light was already on. Mara stood in the window, arms crossed, eyes watching the street like a dog waiting for the wrong sound. I walked in, dropped my keys in the bowl, and said nothing. "You're home," she said. "Just in time." There was a knock at the door. She looked at me. "Are you expecting someone?" Not really expecting. More like arranged. She opened the door. A man in a gray suit handed her a thick manila envelope. "Mrs. Mara Langford?" "Yes." "You've been served." She stared at the folder in her hands like it had just bitten her. The man nodded politely and left. She turned to me, lips parting, but no words coming out. Inside the packet, divorce filing, an amicable split proposal, full transfer of house rights to her, separate banking, and a clean severance. I even kept the dog out of it. "We don't have one, but if we did, I'd have let her keep it." "You filed," she said, as if confirming something she hadn't dared to imagine. "Last Wednesday," I replied. "Calm as a spring lake." "But I thought we were going to talk," I finished. "We are. We just needed a different setting." She opened her mouth again, but I held up a hand. "I gave you a week, Mara. A whole week. You could have come clean, asked to explain. Hell, even just apologized." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. "You acted like nothing happened. Like a man didn't sneak out of my bed while I was parking in the driveway. That's not fair." "No, it's not," I agreed. "It's not fair that I had to sit across from my wife while she fried me eggs with another man's cologne still clinging to her neck. It's not fair that I had to listen to excuses about catalog beds and cardamom pastries while pretending I couldn't hear the guilt in her silence." Her voice cracked. "You should have said something." "I did," I said. "I said nothing. That was your cue." The silence between us settled like dust in an abandoned room. She took a breath, like she might say something monumental. But all that came out was, "Where will you go?" I shrugged. "Out," she frowned. "Out?" "You'll like this part," I said, reaching into my jacket. I pulled out a small set of keys, brass, still shining, tagged with a laminated label that read, "Lot 7, Coyote Ridge." She blinked. "The land?" I nodded. "Yeah, the one we looked at 5 years ago. The one with the view of the ravine and no neighbors for miles. I signed the papers last week. But we said a lot of things, Mara." I walked to the kitchen, grabbed the envelope she left on the counter, and tucked it back into her hands. "This," I said, tapping the folder, "is my final conversation. Anything else you want to say? Tell it to your reflection." I'm done talking in circles. She just stood there, barefoot, clutching the manila envelope like a raft in a rising tide. I stepped out the door without looking back. 30 minutes later, I was outside city limits. Windows down. Old-school jazz playing low. Not the kind she used for morning ambiance, but the kind that made you feel like the main character in a story with no need for applause. I reached the turnoff for Coyote Ridge just as the sun dipped behind the hills. There was no house yet. Just a patch of dirt, a rusty mailbox, and a hell of a view. I parked the truck, got out, and walked toward the edge where the hill drops off into nothing but trees and wild sky. For the first time in months, I breathed. Without feeling like I had to brace for something. I wasn't angry, I wasn't bitter, just done. And as I stood there with my boots planted in red dust and the wind tugging at the sleeves of my flannel shirt, I smiled. Not a triumphant smile. Not a revenge smile, just free. My final thought? Life goes on, just without the lies, and definitely without yoga.